Welcome back to Dynasty What If. I'm Paul Patterson. He's Chris Miles. Today we're going to talk about what might happen in 2023. Today our focus is going to be on Calvin Ridley, who's returning after a full year suspension to his new team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. What's the realistic best case scenario for Ridley? What's the potential floor? That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to go first here. I'm going to give the ceiling case for Calvin Ridley, which is really just what if he's the same guy that he was in 2020? We saw Calvin Ridley have a huge season in 2020 for the Falcons, 26% target share. He had a 14 ADOT, 41% of the Falcons' air yards. He was fourth in receiving yards. He was seventh in yards per out run. He was efficient. He was productive. He actually finished fourth in fantasy points per game that year with 18.8, which is more than A.J. Brown and CeeDee Lamb have ever had in the season in their careers. So he was a fantasy stud. The next year, he dealt with a foot injury. He dealt with mental health problems. He dealt with generally inaccurate quarterback play. He was still averaging over 10 targets per game for the first 5 games of 2021. He just wasn't putting the fantasy points together that he had the year before. But now he's back. He's healthy. He's had a year to get his mind right. Basically, if he's the same guy that he was when he stepped out of the NFL, now he has Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback entering his 3rd season in a very passing friendly Jacksonville offense. They were 9th in attempts per game last year, and that could easily increase with Ridley joining the offense alongside Evan Ingram, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk. So I really think Ridley could flirt with a top 5 finish. The big question is just going to be whether he still has that same ability. All the clips coming out of training camp already seem to indicate that he has that same kind of burst and route running ability that he did. So I'm very excited to see what he can do in 2023. Chris, how about you rain on our parades now and give us the floor case for Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, so I guess when you bring up Calvin Ridley's elite season, we need to mention that was his only elite season, as well as it was a season that Matt Ryan and the Falcons led the NFL in pass attempts. So he was in a very friendly environment. It was his only real, elite season. And then the only other times we've seen he's been above replacement level, but not elite, or not very great from a fantasy perspective in 2021. In that season, also, his only receiving competition was Russell Gage, Hayden Hurst, and a worn down Julio Jones that only played 9 games. Ridley was the only, mediocre plus asset on the team. It was also 3 years ago. There's a chance that Calvin Ridley comes back as he was also an old rookie. So I believe he's 28 or 29 now. And he could come back, and if he's not very good, it's just going to absolutely crush his dynasty value.
Yeah, I mean, you make some points about the target competition, and that's fine. My counter would be that he was not only earning a high percentage of the team's volume, but he was also very efficient with that volume. So, it wasn't just a matter of funneling the targets to the only decent player. He was doing a lot with that volume. And yes, they did lead the league in pass attempts, but first of all, Jacksonville could come close to doing that. And second, he still did have a high market share, relative to other wide receivers as well. So I feel confident in saying that he was a great receiver in 2020. I don't know for sure if he's still that great receiver, but I guess I'm in at the cost of wide receiver 27 in Dynasty. I'm in on finding out. Like, he is a 3rd round pick in best ball drafts. So there is a lot of optimism around him. And he's 28. He'll be 29 in December. He's basically a year younger than Stephon Diggs, almost exactly. So if he puts together that huge season that I think is possible, and then he's 29 next year, I don't really know why he'd be going significantly later than we see Diggs going now. Like, I think he could be a 4th round startup pick this time next season if he's tethered to Trevor Lawrence long term and everything kind of pans out. So I actually do think that there's room for a significant value increase. Like you said, there is a floor for sure, because we don't know what the time away from the game is going to do. His ADP is going to drop if he isn't as good as we think. But I just don't, it's hard for me to imagine him just completely dudding out, like he's still in his prime age. What do you think is the most likely outcome here?
So I think the most likely outcome is probably that he's good. He's a mid wide receiver too. But, we actually kind of have a recent example of this, a different position, but Deshaun Watson. He missed, a year and a half of football for non-injury reasons. And he came back and he was very rusty last year. He was not, very good from a fantasy standpoint. So if we see that kind of thing happen with Calvin Ridley, I mean, we could see his 6th round startup value drop to, round 13, with other past producers like MT and Brandon Cooks, or even round 15 with somebody like OBJ. So while I do think it is more likely that he'll be, a high-end wide receiver 2 this year than not, we need to realize the risk and what could happen if he does hit that floor.
Yeah, that's a reasonable comp. I think with Watson, where I would see a little bit of a difference is just at the quarterback position. It's so much about like seeing the field and mental processing. And I feel like that's more so where he was kind of lagging behind. Whereas with Ridley, like he's been able to practice his route running technique. He's been able to, to stay sharp in that aspect. And I just don't know. I don't know, but I feel like getting back on the field, that's going to come back more quickly. Just, faking out the cornerback, getting open is more natural than reading the defense and making split second decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's a very fair assumption to make. And I think that's reasonable to expect.
Yeah, so just knowing what his talent level was before, it's really hard for me to imagine the whole bottom dropping out, especially being in such a good situation with the glowing reviews he's been receiving. So I feel good about him. Like I don't think he's as risky as some people think, and his ADP has been climbing in Dynasty, to be fair. So now as a mid 6th round pick, it's more of an investment. He's going right around Deebo Samuel at this point. So I can't say it's without risk, but it's a risk that I'm willing to take because if Ridley hasn't lost a step, he really could be like this year's Stephon Diggs, when we saw him go over to the Bills to play with Josh Allen. I think that type of a season is possible.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I think that he could easily be a round 4 startup pick next year.
If you enjoyed this video, leave a like or a comment down below. Really helps us out. And subscribe to Dynasty Football Factory so that you can catch all of our future videos, including more installments of Dynasty What If, which will be coming at you the next few weeks as we lead up to the football season. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.